Okay, today we're going to get into the book of Mark, chapter 3. So if you have your Bibles, open up to verses 7 to 19. We're going to talk about training the 12. And let's start with this question. Are you a Jesus groupie or a faithful follower? There's a difference between these two things. A Jesus groupie seeks the hand of God for something that he can give them, and a faithful follower seeks the face of God for a real relationship with him. Let's take a look at the text. Mark chapter 3, verses 7 to 8, it says, Jesus went out to the lake with his disciples, and a large crowd followed him. These were the groupies. They came from all over Galilee, Judea, Jerusalem, Idumea, from east of the Jordan River, and even from as far north as Tyre and Sidon. The news about his miracles had spread far and wide, and vast numbers of groupies came to see him. Now let's go ahead and map this out. We're looking at the Lake Tiberias, otherwise known as the Sea of Galilee. And that passage said that people were coming from Jerusalem and Judea and Idumea, so we can see how far away those were to the south. And also it said that there were people coming from east of the Jordan, that would be Perea and Decapolis, and then from as far north as Tyre and Sidon. Now remember, these were the days where they didn't have cars or trains or planes, so these people would have taken a long time to make it to where Jesus was so he could perform some sort of miracle for them. Verse 9, Jesus instructed his disciples to have a boat ready so the crowd wouldn't crush him. He had healed many people that day, so all the sick people eagerly pushed forward to touch him, and whenever those possessed by evil spirits caught sight of him, the spirits would throw them to the ground in front of him, shrieking, "You are the Son of God." But Jesus sternly commanded the spirits not to reveal who he was. So look, we can see that Jesus healed many people, and that's why he had so many groupies that were pushing forward to touch him. Now let's contrast that with the faithful followers. Verse 13, it says that afterward Jesus went up on a mountain and called out the ones he wanted to go with him, and they came to him. Then he appointed 12 of them and called them his apostles. They were to accompany him, and he would send them out to preach, giving them authority to cast out demons. Notice he says they're the called out ones. This reminds me of the word ecclesia, which is the word for church in the New Testament, which literally means the called out ones. And notice what it says about them. They came to him. See, that speaks of relationship, seeking his face, not just his hand. Sometimes Jesus calls us to leave the crowds and go spend some time with him. And when we do that, here's what happens, that he sends them out to preach. And this is the real telltale sign of a faithful follower. It's someone who goes away with Jesus and then goes out on mission with Jesus. Now, the end of this passage lists out the 12 that he chose. Simon, whom he named Peter, James and John, the sons of Zebedee, but Jesus nicknamed them sons of thunder, Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who later betrayed him. And look at how ordinary these men were. First of all, Simon, this was a guy who was kind of a hothead. He ended up being a leader of these 12, but he was far from impressive. He really was just an ordinary guy. Or how about James and John? They worked for their dad. They were kind of mama's boys, and for some reason they get this nickname, Sons of Thunder. Maybe that had something to do with the time they're walking by one of the towns that rejected them, and they looked at Jesus and said, "Should we call down fire from heaven on the town?" Or how about Matthew? This guy was a tax collector, also known as Levi, which probably means that he descended from the tribe of the Levites, or the priests of the people. And so instead of serving the people of Israel, he was extorting money from them as a tax collector from the Romans. That is, until Jesus called him. And he probably didn't get along very well with Simon the Zealot. This guy was a political revolutionary trying to free the Israelites from the rule of the Romans, which is probably why he was following Jesus in the first place. Maybe he thought Jesus was the Messiah who was going to lead them in victory militarily over the Roman oppressors. And last but not least, Judas Iscariot, who later betrayed Jesus. And just the fact that this guy is part of the inner 12 really shows us that God's sovereign plan cannot be thwarted even by someone like Judas. That God's going to use all things to work together for the good of those who are called by his name. So let's go back to that opening question, and you can talk about this with your family or small group or mentor. Are you a Jesus groupie? Are you someone who is seeking the hand of God for what he could provide for you? Or are you a faithful follower, someone like these 12 disciples, who's willing to leave the crowd and go away with Jesus, only to come back and be on mission with him?